Dmytro Shpakovskyi here. Welcome to my presentation. I'm going to share my thoughts on how to select a test automation framework that documents your product. My presentation is going to go in three parts. First, I'll highlight the test automation framework's history. After that, we'll discuss some of the common problems that occur while selecting testing frameworks. And finally, we'll review how to document your product with tests. In this presentation, I will outline JavaScript frameworks as they are developing very rapidly while gaining more and more popularity. Okay, before we start, a few words about me. I have over a decade of experience in test automation, quality assurance, and software as a service industries. During my career, I built and maintained numerous test automation frameworks, managed distributed teams of QA engineers, mentored and helped to convert manual test engineers to test automation. You can often find me creating and open sourcing new test automation frameworks, mentoring other QA engineers, or exploring new tools and techniques for automated testing. In addition to that, I wrote a book called Modern Web Testing with TestCafe. It's a non-nonsense guide to getting started quickly by building a complete test suite while learning the core concepts of test automation with TestCafe. But enough about me, let's briefly go through the recent history of JavaScript test automation frameworks. So, in 2004, Selenium was created. After that, in 2005, WebDriver creation was done. In 2009, both of them merged into Selenium WebDriver. Then, in 2011, the first version of WebDriver IO was released. And in 2012, World Wide Web Consortium started working on a centralized WebDriver protocol. In 2013, the first version of Protractor emerged. 2016 was the year when TestCafe got its first release. Then, in 2017, Cypress opened a public beta, and in addition to that, the first version of Puppeteer was shipped. In 2018, Selenium WebDriver became an official World Wide Web Consortium recommendation for browser automation. And finally, in 2020, the first version of Playwright got released. So, as you can see, quite of a history for JavaScript and test automation there. That was some historical overview, and now let's have a look at the common problems that usually go hand in hand with picking up a test automation framework. Let's begin from the framework selection. And the first problem we'll face is the variety of frameworks: Selenium, TestCafe, WebDriver IO, Cypress, Protractor, Playwright. What to choose? Let's have a comparison by the age. How old are they? Here's a graph to answer that question. As you can observe, the oldest one is Selenium, next goes WebDriver IO, and the youngest of all is Playwright. But the age metric is a bit tricky. It doesn't mean that any framework is good or bad, it just shows how much time each of them had to mature. Now let's look at one of the most popular metrics, the amount of stars on GitHub. Here's a nice graph illustrating that. As you can see, even though Selenium is a World Wide Web Consortium standard and is the oldest among the listed, it still got less stars than two newcomers, Cypress and Playwright. Let's see how they do in terms of weekly downloads on NPM registry. It looks like Selenium and Cypress are the leaders. Protractor is still pretty popular, even though the Angular team recently announced that it will be sunsetted at the end of 2022. But what if we compare the amount of stars with the weekly downloads? As you can see, the bar charts are pretty impressive, but still the amount of GitHub stars doesn't exactly correlate with the weekly downloads. For example, WebDriver IO doesn't have much stars compared to its rivals, but the number of its weekly downloads is impressive. So what else can we use to make an informed decision about the framework? Let's dive a bit deeper to see what features are offered by the frameworks. As you can see, each of the frameworks has its own strong points, for example, the ease of initial setup, and the trade-offs, like the ability or inability to work with multiple browser tabs. And that's absolutely fine. The thing to note though is the overall feature direction of development for each particular framework. So, how to make a choice within such a variety of options? The final algorithm for test automation framework selection can somehow look like this. Firstly, review the framework repository on GitHub. How popular it is, how often does it get updated, how active is the community, what is the amount of opened issues, and how fast the bugs are being fixed. Then look at the list of features provided by the framework. After that, browse through the list of possible trade-offs and think over if that is something acceptable for your particular project. And finally, Make a proof of concept with a set of simple tests and present it to the team. This way you'll gather all opinions and feedbacks to make a final decision. So, the framework is selected, for example it can be TestCafe, and we can start writing tests. As their number will be growing quite fast, let's see how to simplify test development process and document our product at the same time. I'm pretty sure most of you have heard about this solution. It's Cucumber. And among others, there are 4 advantages that it can give us. Better documentation available for all team members. Both developers and product owners will have a possibility to easily read your tests step by step. Single place to keep test functions and step definitions. This way you can easily switch testing frameworks without rewriting tests. All you'll have to do is to update step definitions for the basic actions, and all the tests will be green again. More modularity and code reusability. Now the tests will be stored in feature files and will look just like the ordinary lines of text, one action per line. Test files separated from testing framework. You'll have a separate folder with all the tests, or feature files with steps as Cucumber names it, and a separate folder for all step definitions. So here how the code comparison will look like. From the left side is a simple test written with pure TestCafe, and from the right side is the same test but written as Cucumber steps with TestCafe under the hood. What it does is just going to the Google products page and verifying its title. Looks much more structured, almost like documentation, right? But where is TestCafe, you'll ask? Let me show you how step definitions actually look like. As you can observe, they're pretty atomic. It gives us the possibility to combine and reuse such steps to perform any actions on a page, and at the same time, our test files look almost like step-by-step documentation. If you're thinking about that it looks fun, but you don't want to write all the step definitions for each basic action, that's totally understandable. That's why I wrote an absolutely free and open source package called TestCafe Cucumber Steps. It provides all those basic and reusable step definitions when you install it right out of the box. You can find it on GitHub by following this link. I use it myself and I hope it will be helpful for you too. This package is minimalistic in terms of dependencies and is reusable at the same time. It's approved and listed among the plugins in TestCafe official documentation, so check it out on GitHub. So what's inside? This TestCafe Cucumber Steps package has 43 step definitions that covers pretty much all basic steps to interact with web elements, and verifications are also built in. I hope you enjoyed today's presentation. Please feel free to add me on LinkedIn and GitHub. I'm always ready to discuss interesting ideas and approaches.